You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Born in Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe, but I do travel all over the world doing workshops or concerts with the different artists that I work with. Dr. Mtukudzi actually played at the very first Jacaranda music festival, which was in 2018. So he was one of the first acts that we had. It's an hour and a half flight to South Africa, to Joburg from Harare. It's an hour's flight from Harare to Lusaka. In Africa, travel is not as easy as it should. There's definitely a lot of scope in investment and in support that can come from corporate world to the growing African creative economy.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find inspirational people who are doing inspirational things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have another special guest. We have Walter Wanyanya, who is a creative and tech entrepreneur based in Harare with business interests in South Africa. He's the founder of TechTools Technology, founder and artistic director of the Jacaranda Music Festival, Jabulani Jazz Festival, and the Flame Lily Rock Music Festival, and also Carp DM. Welcome to the podcast, Walter. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. That was quite an intro.
I hope I've done you justice with that intro.
Oh, thank you so much. I think I'm going to hire you for the next time that I need, someone to do that whole.
It'll be an absolute pleasure. But no, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I know you're kind of knee deep in festival activities at the moment, so I really do appreciate it. Before we get started and get into the conversation, if you can please introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Walter Wanyanya.
So my name is Walter Wanyanya, born and raised in Zimbabwe and born in Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. I've been literally living in Zim all my life, but I do travel, obviously, for work and then all over the world doing workshops or concerts with the different artists that I work with. But all our business and all our work is obviously based here in Africa, mostly in Southern Africa. I started off in the music space or the creative space as a bass player. So I started playing bass when I was 13 years old in my local church here called Celebration Church. That's where I started to play music. And then obviously, as I was starting to play music, I wanted to do more out of the music than what I was doing, which was just simply playing. And I got into management. And then I also got into event production. So that's basically the quickest and the shortest introduction I can make as far as that is concerned. So obviously, as far as then the events that we started doing, as you said in the introduction, we do have Jacaranda Music Festival, which happens every October, and it's coming up, this October, which we are in the middle of planning right now. We just had Carpe Diem, which was in June. This is a new event property that we have, which is DJ-driven. It's a single-day DJ-driven event with about 20 plus DJs from all over Africa performing there. Jacaranda is 3 days of performances and 2 days of workshops, so educational workshops to kind of help and equip all the creatives that we have in Zimbabwe about the creative economy. So we bring in experts that come and speak to the artists, and these are free workshops over 2 days. Speak to the artists about publishing, speak to the artists about professionalism, speak to artists about everything that they need to know as far as preparing them for the international market, regional market, and what people are expecting. We bring in festival directors who can help them to kind of prepare before they are booked, for the touring circuit. We bring in booking agents. We basically just avail a lot of information and a lot of educational material to equip the artists that we work with, because a lot of these guys, they come from taking on music as a hobby, and they do hone in on their skill, which is basically the creative side. But then the business side sometimes gets neglected. And then if you don't find the right balance as an artist, then it becomes difficult for you to become as relevant as it should be, because obviously the world requires you to be creative, talented.
Yeah.
It also requires you to have the basic business acumen that is needed for you to be able to be part of any economy. So that's what we make sure that we equip these guys. So our main sponsor for Jacaranda Music Festival is a bank called Stanbic Bank. So obviously they are, financial experts. So they bring in all their people as well for financial literacy sessions. And then we also have guys from the legal side of things that come in and talk about IP, the whole intellectual property side of things, agreements, contracts, and that sort of thing. So that's something that we do as well for the third property that we have, which is Jabulani Jazz Festival. We also do workshops for that, similar,
Brilliant.
but obviously targeting the jazz artists that we have in Zimbabwe. And then the other property that we have, music property, is called Flame Lily Rock Music Festival. So I actually, when I was playing with bands, I used to play a lot of rock music. So rock music is kind of like my soft spot, believe it or not. So we do have the Flame Lily Rock Music Festival that happens every November here in Zimbabwe. It's a single day event as well. But that particular one doesn't have the workshop component to it. It's just the performances that we have. So yeah, that's kind of top and tail of what we're doing here in Zimbabwe from a creative economy perspective.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So I guess if we take a few steps back, early on you mentioned that you started in the music industry as a bass player. I think you started playing in church.
Yes, sir.
How did that experience influence your journey into the music industry?
That experience was everything for me as far as what I'm doing now. It was literally the foundation I needed that I didn't even know that I needed. The thing is, when I went to that particular church, I walked into that church and I was a young boy, young teenager. I'd never really experienced church in that way because I had gone to a Methodist church in Zimbabwe. We really didn't have like a band performing, doing praise and worship before, someone gets up to speak. It was all very traditional music and like choirs and, hymns and that kind of thing. So the first time I went into Celebration Church, which is a Pentecostal church, so there's the full band on stage. They're going crazy, they're going wild. I was like, wow, this is nice. I was really intrigued and I was really interested in the music side of things, from the church. And I kept on going back to the church because I loved the music. So I eventually became part of the children's church. And then in that children's church, they said that they wanted to start a band for the kids. So I took it upon myself and two friends of mine, we went and volunteered and said, yep, we want to be part of that band. We couldn't play an instrument, we couldn't sing, we couldn't do nothing. We had to start from scratch. So they helped us to start learning. And and after that, after I signed up, I think that same week, I went into town and I looked for a bookshop and a music store. I bought a beginner's guide to learning bass guitar, and it had a CD in it. And I literally read the book and played the CD at home. And I didn't have a guitar at the time. And I would go to church and practice what I'd been reading theoretically at home, and then I would practice before the other guys that were more established started playing. I'd ask for the church guitar and I would do the practicals from that little book. So I basically taught myself how to play. And fast forward, I then became part of the main church band and the youth band, and basically the touring band of the church. So we toured everywhere. We went to Kenya, all over Africa, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana. We went to the States, and performing. And then we started a big choir called the Celebration Choir. And it's still in existence today. I'm just not part of it anymore. But so I was one of the very first guys to be part of that choir. And the other thing that I would love to mention about my experience when I was in the church was because I was playing on Friday at the youth church service. I was playing on Saturday at the young adults church service, and then I was playing on Sunday 3 services, Friday 1 in the morning, at 8 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock in the evening. I basically got a lot of practice. So I put in the hours as far as practice and performing was concerned. And then also the church had a very high standard of how things are done, as far as preparation, as far as the church services themselves, the program, how it goes, the timekeeping and that kind of thing. These are things that I now apply and use on my, when I run my own events, because it literally was the training and foundation that I needed as far as live event production goes, which is what I do mostly now, in the music space. So it definitely helped me to be able to kind of understand what it means when we say we have to do rehearsal at this time, we have to do sound check at this time, and why we do sound check, and so I could go on and on about all that I learned. But I basically, to answer your question in a short way, it was literally the foundation, the education, the university, the college that I needed as far as me and my team now working in the creative economy of Zimbabwe. I definitely couldn't be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for that.
So fast forward to now, you are an established events organizer, promoter. So what motivated or what was the catalyst behind the transition from a musician to a event organizer?
So when I was playing in the church, my focus was just for me to just be a musician. I never wanted to do anything else in life. I was just like, I'm going to be a musician all my life. This is it. And I loved it. And I love being able to create. I love the power that you get from, banding together with 5, 6 people in a band. You write a song, you create something, and then you play it for people. They accept it, they enjoy it. It was just so fulfilling to be able to say, hey, wow, we've got 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people in church, and you're presenting a new song that you guys would have written and perfected over a couple of months. And then you've got these people that are really appreciating the music and the work and the creativity that you'd have put into it. It was so fulfilling to be able to see people enjoy, see people dance, see people happy from what you would have created. It kind of like I was addicted to being able to make people happy in that manner. So I was like, no, I don't want to do anything else in life. This is it. I would love to just be able to do this all my life. But at the time, I was young and I didn't have a job. I hadn't gone to university or anything like that. And I was pretty focused on doing that. But obviously, there was a time now where I needed to kind of get a job and get a good, decent salary because my mother at the time was the one that was financing all my musical needs, my guitars, my travel, transport just to get to church and back, because we were not funded by the church to be able to be a musician in the church. We had to fund ourselves. So we're not getting a salary or anything like that. So my mom had a really modest job as a maid, as you want to call it. So she wasn't a highly paid person. So she was struggling to obviously get all of us kids to school and everything else. And here I was wanting to be a musician and I'm not paid. So I had to get a job. So because I had to get a job, I then had to switch my mind. I had to have a paradigm shift about what it means for me to be a musician and how it can be profitable. I want to do it. I want to be a creative. But funny enough, as you mentioned, I do run a company called TechTools Technology. So I did get a job. Basically, I came across, the IT space, which is not something that I had experience in, but I just wanted a job that kind of can supplement and give me money enough for me to become a musician and maintain that life as a musician. So I got this job and I didn't care what I did as long as it gave me enough money. And I got this job from someone that was already in the church as well, who understood my commitment to the church. And I was happy with that because then they would allow me to be able to leave and to go on tour and to record and to do the kind of stuff. They would give me time off because they were in the church with me. So I was pretty happy about that kind of setup. But anyways, as I got into that IT field, I excelled in it. I became a specialist, in the Epson printing space. So we used to supply computers to banks, to schools and things like that. And then we would also supply those computers with printers and scanners and cameras made by Epson. So I went and got training as an Epson technician. And I got certified and I became, the top technician in the company. And at the same time, I was still playing music and at church. So now at least I wasn't bothering my mom about money and things like that. I could sustain myself. But at the same time, as I was working and doing what I was doing in the IT space, I was now thinking seriously about how my love for music and how I can turn my love for music and the creative space into income, into something that can actually earn me money, because I didn't want to continue being an IT expert, but I also didn't want to give up my music, because both things were now demanding, most of my time. So at the end of the day, I found a way of being able to do both, and I managed to do both. And then I eventually, then after that, got trained as an Apple specialist. So working with Apple products, iPhones, iPads and things like that, which is what TechTools does here in Zimbabwe. So I basically found a balance between me being an IT technician or IT expert, if you want to call it that, and me being a musician.
Yeah.
I transitioned from then playing bass to management, because the demand that was there for me as a bass player was so huge that I couldn't balance the work time and also me being performing with a band. I then decided that, you know what, I'm going to put my guitar down. I'm still going to get involved in the creative space, but I'm going to now start managing artists, because I obviously now had a bit of experience in the business space. I wanted to now merge the two, my knowledge in the business space and then also what I know as an artist myself. So I then started working with a young artist that I started managing. And then, I eventually started managing one of the biggest artists in Zimbabwe, which is Dr. Oliver Mtukudzi. I don't know if you know about him, but
Yeah.
he is literally one of our iconic musicians, and he's passed away. But I managed him the last 6 years of his life. And that is then fast forward to that. And then eventually, obviously, starting my company, Ngoma Nehosho, which does all these events that we've mentioned already, plus also does management and plus does artist development. But every now and then I do pick up my guitar. I still have all my guitars. I can do studio work, if I've got the time. And then sometimes I do, get on stage and I do play with bands every now and then.
Oh, brilliant.
But I'm still getting the pleasure that I got from performing on stage. I still get the same pleasure that I get from actually creating these, event properties that we have. So I'm still exercising my creativity and everything else. So it's kind of still the same. It's not the same, but it's it's close.
You are experienced in the music industry and IT tech space. I guess it's safe to say there is a bit of a crossover when it comes to tech and music. How do you think the tech business or being an IT technician has shaped your understanding of the creative and music space?
It's definitely helped me a lot, because, like if you look, especially now as things have been progressing in the creative economies all over the world, with the coming in of streaming, with the coming in of using devices. I remember when the iPod was introduced, it changed the face of music and how we consume music, because the iPod was a transition from the Walkman and the Discman and that kind of thing. That was my early days of getting in and working with Apple when that particular device came. And the iPod eventually demanded the App Store, which then came onto the iPhone, and then the App Store giving access to the gazillion of applications that are now available on iOS and then also obviously on Android. So I literally saw the development of how the music industry and the creative economies have now literally changed based on how technology has been changing. Now we're talking AI, and how is AI going to affect what we do and how we consume creativity, how we consume music, how we consume products. There's so many things that I'm so grateful for right now because of my foundation in the IT space. I can be able to move with the times without me trying to harness or to understand what's going on with technology if I was just a musician who is not clued up about technology is going and how it's actually affecting how we do business today. So definitely it's been a blessing, because not a lot of people who are in my space also are involved in the IT space. So it's an advantage. I can say that it was definitely a God thing, the reason why that those two things intersected and the way we're working together now. So it's an absolute blessing, and I'm loving how things are going. And I think maybe our company or business has progressed because of that. And most of my guys are also very clued up about what's going on in tech, especially for Africa. We're definitely not behind.
Definitely. So would you say the success you've had in the tech business has influenced the way that you operate in the music industry?
Definitely. I think the success that I've had in the tech business gave me the business foundation. which then I merged with the creative foundation that I had, when I was playing in the band and then I was doing just creative work. The company that I used to work for before I actually started my own IT company, I then started running that company on behalf of somebody. So I also got business experience in the IT space, basically how to run a business, whether it was an IT business or grocer or whatever, but I got experience in being able to run a business as an entrepreneur. I then merged the experience that I got in the IT space from a purely business perspective, and then applied all those things in the creative business that I was now starting, because I had to formalize all the work that I was doing from management to events, and it had to be formal, because the work that we're doing, we're dealing with other established businesses. We couldn't do and work just as informal musicians and things like that. So I had to now register a company, get all the paperwork that are needed in Zimbabwe for you to be able to operate as a business, etc., etc. So it's definitely helped me to be able to make business decisions that are not just like shooting in the wind, that kind of thing.
I understand. In the intro, I forgot to mention that you're also the founder of Ngoma Nehosho.
Yes.
Which is a artist development and promotional company. So is there any crossover between the IT tech work and the event management work that you do?
Yeah, there is a crossover. The crossover comes, funny enough, like the stores that we use for the IT are also our box offices.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
So when we're actually selling tickets and doing everything that we need to do, we've actually used the IT stores as places where people can buy tickets. They kind of morph in between being an IT store and also a box office. So what we do is we just get someone to man a kiosk or a counter that people can then now just come and buy tickets or come to do business that is Ngoma Nehosho related. So Ngoma Nehosho and TechTools kind of work on each other's back. They scratch each other's backs in many ways. And also with the IT side of things, all our ticket scanning and things like that, then TechTools is the one that then can do the procurement of all the gadgets that we use for access and things like that, because we're a technology company. So TechTools is basically short for technology tools. They definitely interact and they're definitely related, and it's a huge advantage to have both companies running.
So it's clear that you've created almost like an ecosystem between your different ventures. So do many of the artists that you manage actually play at your festivals, such as the Jacaranda Music Festival?
Yeah, they do. Now we have to make sure that I am not biased when we're curating artists. So when we're curating the artist lineups, we basically look and say, what is the festival playlist asking for? What is the festival vibe, or what are we looking at this year, and which are the artists that we need? And if it so happens that some of the artists that we are working with under Ngoma Nehosho, as we do management and artist development, if they are meeting those requirements, we can book them. So we just have to be very careful that we are not only booking our acts, and making sure that our guys are the ones that get, to get stage time. But we definitely, have some of our acts being booked at Jacaranda. Dr. Mtukudzi actually played at the very first Jacaranda Music Festival, which was in 2018. So he was one of the first acts that we had. But obviously, the reason why we had him there was he was, and possibly still is, the greatest of all time as far as Zimbabwean artists go. We couldn't have Jacaranda without him. He was definitely iconic. So we had him at the first Jacaranda, and off stage he inspired me a lot as far as doing what I'm doing now, and and pushing and going for it, and being able to build all these platforms and doing what I'm doing right now. So he was a huge influence and mentor, and, obviously, as well as Dr. Huma Sekela as well. It's amazing the kind of work and the kind of help that I got from those two particular gentlemen.
It's amazing to have such mentors to work alongside. I'm actually quite jealous. So you mentioned the festival vibe and the ethos determines who plays. So if you look at, I guess, the ethos behind the festivals and the inspiration, the drives, what was it that inspired you to actually create the Jacaranda Music Festival?
So before I created Jacaranda Music Festival, remember I was also working and touring with Dr. Oliver Mtukudzi. So I'd seen a whole lot of festivals everywhere: Portugal, South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, all over Africa, the UK. I had seen what people are doing on the festival scene. And I also got mentorship and help from Bra Peter Hlade, who is the founder and director of a festival in South Africa called Joy of Jazz. I was introduced to him by Dr. Hugh Masekela, and both of them were, old friends from back in the day. And I was working with Dr. Masekela, introduced me to Brad Peter, who was the festival director, and I started, shadowing him and basically gleaning on him and hearing more about working and festival spaces in Africa. And as far as that was concerned, I kind of helped, in one or two events outside of Zimbabwe. And I was like, I really need to do something in Zim because we needed more spaces. We've got a lot of musicians basically in Africa, not just Zimbabwe. We've got a lot of musicians in Zimbabwe that are extremely talented. Some of them are not popular, but their music is good quality music. And if they don't get good platforms for them to be able to showcase and be able to perform, it will take them a long time for them to be seen and appreciated and for them to be able to get to a point where they can see something happening with their music. So we do have concerts, but usually with a concert, you've got 2, 3 opening acts and the headliner, and that's it. So a lot of those concerts happen. So the reason why I wanted a festival was we wanted something that happens over a couple of days and then something that also gives a larger number of artists a platform. Instead of 3 artists, we have 12 artists on a Saturday, we have 8 artists on a Friday, and we have 12 artists on a Sunday. So it means that we can actually put more artists on a stage, and it's a festive environment. And we can have, the young up and coming artists come and showcase. It's not really about, this guy is a big act, this guy is a headliner. No. We're looking at good quality music. So the festival itself is the main attraction, and then the artists are the bonus. So we make sure that we just get really good artists. And some of the people that do come, even Zimbabwean people that are coming to our festival, they don't even know some of these artists that we put on our stages, but they are there among them. But what they've known is they know that if they see a name on the lineup, they may not know the name, but they will know that they wouldn't be there if they're not good. So we have tried to push and make sure that the festival itself is the attraction. This is the reason why people come to the festival. Then it means that we can now go and get the young artists, the grassroots artists, to be able to come and perform at Jacaranda without them being there because of their name and whatever. So that way, it means that we can definitely do more and we can create more. And then obviously the other thing, that the reason what inspired me to start the festival was the education side of the event itself. Is I'm really passionate about education and sharing of knowledge. And I believe that, we could do more, not just in the creative space, on the music space on the continent, but if we shared more knowledge amongst us, no matter what it is, we can do more as a continent. And a lot of times, I don't know about anywhere else in Africa, but a lot of times in people in Zimbabwe, if someone knows something, people are not really keen on sharing what you have done for you to be progressive, what you've done for you to be successful. And I believe that sharing tips and nuggets, if it's something that's taken me 10 years, if I share with somebody else, I'm hoping that what has taken me 10 years is going to take them 5 years. And if they do the same and share it with the next person, if it took them 5 years, the next person they share with, it must take them 2 years. So this is across any industry, across anything that we do as Africans. And I believe that sharing of knowledge and also documenting a lot of what we do and a lot of what we're talking about, the lessons that we have, it's important. If those things are documented, if that knowledge is shared, if we gather around and get young people to say, hey, this is what I did. It took me 2 years to do this and avoid this, maximize on this, learn new languages, maximize on this skill and that, and all that kind of stuff. I believe the education side of things is pretty critical. So that's why we started the workshops, and that's why we also started the performances themselves, so that, that we can, I would really love to see a really big, robust, creative economy coming out of Africa.
So you mentioned that you're passionate about the educational side of the festival. So if we look at that in a bit more detail in terms of how do you believe or feel the festival actually impacts the local community in Harare, both economic level and cultural level?
So on the cultural level, like I said, we are definitely geared and And we encourage a lot of the young guys to stay true to their art, stay true to their identity. We do get influenced by a lot of music that is not Zimbabwean, that is not African, but we also encourage our artists to make sure that they give us authentically African Zimbabwean music, whatever it is. The world doesn't need another Jay-Z, it doesn't need another Beyonce, it doesn't need another Rihanna. But Rihanna is going to respect an authentically Zimbabwean artist. Jay-Z is going to respect an authentically Ghanaian artist. And the people of America are going to respect authentic African music, not music that's trying to sound American. I don't know if that makes sense. So we always encourage a lot of our people to make sure that the music that they're presenting is authentically African, because if we're going to be relevant, on the world stages, we're only going to be relevant if we are presenting the world something that is authentically African. So that's how I believe that we are impacting the cultural aspect of things. And also, still in the cultural aspect of things, we also make sure that we try and bring in other people from from the continent. Zambia, we've got Zambians coming to perform in this year's festival. We've got guys from South Africa, we've got guys from Angola, we've got guys from Nigeria at this year's festival. That also encourages now the interactions between the different cultures across the continent. So that's the cultural side of things. The business and the community side of things, we run, obviously, every festival, needs food. We need to eat when we need to drink. So we do have the Stand Big Bag Jacaranda Music Festival Food Village, which we don't run a food stall ourselves as the festival. What we do is we get young people that are in the catering business. We get them and they come and put up their stalls and their food vans and their food trucks, and they are the ones that are running and selling food in the food market. So last year we had about 25 stalls, which means that it's 25 young people or small to medium enterprises, SMEs, that came in and managed to do business at Jacaranda. And I can't tell you the numbers right now off the top of my head of how much that kind of activity created, but I'll be able to give you the numbers, later. But at the end of the day, we are seeing a lot of people and a lot of businesses that are also attached to the festival annually. And this is just with the one festival. And we apply the same rules on all the 5 properties that we run annually. So we do have a huge ecosystem that is working around the festival itself, where we're providing employment and providing business opportunities for other business units that are there. We also have, this year for the first time, we've got an SME exhibition space that we've created because we've moved into a bigger venue. We've also now seen that because we've got a bigger space, we need to also now have a showcase where businesses can come and exhibit. So besides the food vendors, we now have other businesses, small to medium enterprises that are coming in. They get a space, they come and showcase their ways, or they're just talking about their business and saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is where we are found after the festival. They give out business cards. It's an opportunity for them to network and be exposed. We put their logos up on the big screens, that kind of thing. So that is definitely a highlight and is an exciting thing for me this year, because that's a new thing that we're doing as far as having exhibitions for small to medium enterprises.
Brilliant. So you touched on the economic benefits for local businesses, but if we look at, say, people coming in, how do you see maybe the Jacaranda Festival or African music festivals as a whole contributing to, say, the growth of Africa's tourism industry? Because I guess when we look at festivals, we sometimes just think of the music side, but when we look at it from the economic side, there's a lot of growth or activity that happens and people coming in. So how do you see that working in terms of the benefits that it brings from a tourism perspective?
The tourism aspect, there's so much that can happen as far as people traveling all over the continent for the purposes of consuming festivals and enjoying festivals. At the same time, it encourages tourism. So, for example, if you look at Southern Africa, we are kind of connected. Southern Africa, it's an hour and a half flight to South Africa, to Joburg from Harare. It's an hour's flight from Harare to Lusaka. It's a 2 hour flight, 2.5 hour flight from Harare to Cape Town. It's an hour and a half flight from here to Maputo. So we are pretty close to each other. If we were in Europe, literally, you'd be jumping in from the UK to France to Germany, that kind of thing. But it does happen from a European perspective. But in Africa, travel is not as easy as it should.
Yes.
You understand? So we actually do have an example that I can give you is I do have artists that are coming from Nigeria. They have to have 3 stops somewhere before they can land in Harare. But if there was a direct flight from here to Nigeria, they would be taking a 7-hour flight. But they have to take more than 24 hours before they get to Harare. This is with, different airlines. They have to stop in Joburg. They have to stop in Dubai. They have to stop in Lusaka, Dubai, and Harare. They have to stop in Joburg, Kigali, and then Harare, that kind of thing. So because of those stops, it makes it so expensive. So my point is this. I don't know what needs to be done, and I don't know, where the solution is going to come from, but we could be seeing so much more travel happening for the purposes of tourism and everything else. We could be our own customers as Africans, but traveling around Africa is very, very hard. It's easier for me to get to London than it is for me to get to Abuja.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Which is weird. And I'm like, how is that possible? It's also like visas and things like that. We should not have visas really for fellow Africans. We are asked to get visas for everywhere else. Fine, that's okay. But I think as Africans, we should also loosen the whole visa processing and that kind of thing so that our people can be able to travel the countries and be able to enjoy each other's company, enjoy each other's countries, and appreciate each other. And I think you will probably see that you won't have any of these stories that you hear about xenophobia happening. I think the biggest problem is that people are just not traveled, and people don't know that in Nigeria, life is good. In Zimbabwe, life is good. In South Africa, life is good. And once you see other people enjoying themselves in their own environments, when you see them in your own environment, you don't think that they are there to threaten your environment. And I think that is one of the biggest issues is that because people are not exposed enough and we're not interacting enough as Africans, there's still too many barriers. With that said, it also means that it's a huge opportunity for us to be able to grow. I mean, we can grow as a festival to the Zimbabwean audience, but imagine what can happen if we have busloads, plane loads of people that are flying in from Zambia, Malawi, Kigali, Joburg, flying into Zimbabwe to a festival that has got 30, 40,000 people, what it does for the hotels, what it does for the airlines, what it does for food, what it does for ground transport, taxis, Airbnbs, all the domino effect is huge. And you see that happening everywhere in the world. When you've got an Adele concert happening in Germany, a friend of mine lives in Germany, and she was telling me how every single business benefited just because of that concert that just happened recently in the last few weeks or so. And that can also happen just looking at the African continent as a target market. So we do see a lot of people coming in, and it's picking up where we've got a lot of people coming into Zimbabwe from the neighboring countries coming in for Jacaranda Music Festival. But I think there's a whole lot more that can happen. And it's not just for people to come here for festivals, it's people coming here for business meetings, for investment opportunities. If you as the CEO of your company can quickly come and see what I'm doing on the ground, that I want you to invest in Zimbabwe, and you're based, and you're based in Abuja, how then do we have business? We lose business because it's difficult for you to be able to come here, fly 8 hours, be with me for 72 hours. I show you around and you fly another 8 hours. But if it's going to take you 7 days or 4 or 5 days, then you're losing time flying where you should be working. So, when you consider all those things now, you're going to be like, man, I can't invest in Zim because it's just difficult. So there's a lot, and a long conversation can happen around that particular topic.
Yes. So what do you believe, say, policymakers need to do to support music festivals in Africa in order to create economic impact?
I think the conversations need to start, between the different organizations in the different countries. So for people that do represent creative economies, so I'm talking about, the arts councils of the different countries. So we have a National Arts Council of Zimbabwe. And for the first time with Jacaranda, the National Arts Council of Zimbabwe, after we met with them and we pleaded with them and said, hey, we want to work with these Zambian artists in Zim. Can we go through you to talk to the National Arts Council of Zambia to be able to facilitate for these artists to come? And we do have an artist called James Sakala, who's a young artist based in Lusaka. And he's coming into Jacaranda Music Festival based on the collaboration that's happening between the National Arts Council of Zimbabwe and the National Arts Council of Zambia. And I think more and more of those kind of collaborations and more of those conversations between government to government relationships, if they happen, and then with us as the private sector working with artists, we work together, we can actually see more happening. And when policymakers are involved in all this kind of stuff, so, that's the National Arts Councils that I've just given you an examples of. We can also go up and go to the ministerial level, where the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture in Zimbabwe is having a conversation and has a memorandum with the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture in Tanzania, in Botswana, South Africa, in Ghana, in Kenya. And we say, hey, you've got event properties in Kenya. We can send 2-3 artists to your festivals that the Kenyans are doing. And then we receive 2 Kenyan artists and we receive 3 Tanzanian artists, but the drive is coming from a governmental level. It makes it easier for us as well, because now it means that we can possibly get some kind of budgets or some kind of funding that can come from government to help with mobility, because remember we spoke about the flights. Besides them being long, they are also very expensive. So it's that kind of help that we need. But I think the minute that we start making deliberate effort into having conversations and not just stopping at having conversations and actually start implementing these conversations and agreements, we'll definitely see more happening between governments and between African countries in the creative space.
One area that you are getting support with is through sponsors. So what do you believe the role sponsors play in the success of the Jacaranda Music Festival?
So sponsorship is critical. I mean, we wouldn't have the festival the way it is now. We ran Jacaranda Music Festival for it's on its 8th year running this year. For the last 3 years, we've had the partnership of our main and title sponsor, Stanbic Bank. So we do appreciate their help. We obviously started it from the ground up. And we ran it and we didn't get any sponsors. And it was very difficult. It was a time where we were saying, okay, we're doing great. We're breaking even. But can we continue? The answer to that question is we would have come to a point where we're saying, okay, you know what, let's not do it because we need a lot of money and we need a lot of funding to be able to do it. So sponsorship is critical. But what's important is for us to be able to get to a point where the creatives are also doing what they need to do so that we become attractive and we become good fertile ground, for lack of a better word, for sponsors to be able to partner with us. Because sponsors are also, they're in business and they're looking for properties that they can partner with that make business sense to them from a marketing perspective, from reaching, the end user, from being able to showcase their products, etc. So the role that we need to play as the creatives, as the practitioners, is to make sure that the environment is good enough for those partners and sponsors to be able to come and partner with us. So that it's not a hard sell. We're not shortchanging them. They don't put money in and then they're like, oh no, we didn't get what we wanted out of it. So I think it's critical that we also make sure that we do what we do so that we can get the partners and sponsors on board.
You touched on a key point there, which is making sure the environment is good enough so that you can attract sponsors. If we discuss that in a bit more detail in terms of how do you go about securing and maintaining these sponsorships?
I think from when we started, we would have to kick down doors, we would have to bang down doors, we would have to borrow, we would have to beg, we would have to send emails, we would have to do all sorts of things. We still do that. But I think the properties that we're working with, as our reputation has been growing as a good company or good festivals to partner with, we do less and less of that for obvious reasons. because now, the sponsors have seen that we've been consistent for so many years, and it wasn't a fluke that Jacaranda was great and successful the first year, second year, third year, fourth year. They had to obviously look at us and say, okay, these guys mean business, they're here to stay, and they're consistent with their quality, and they come and then they do that. So we also have to be consistent in making sure that, we deliver what we said we will deliver on. Just like any partnership, it doesn't have to be sponsorship. When you get into any partnership, you've got your end of the bargain that you're supposed to keep up. You just make sure that you do that. If you can do above what you said you would do, better. So, I would say that you just stay consistent and make sure that the product is good and the product is something that people would want to partner with and put their name, their logo next to yours.
It's clear that you understand the importance of sponsorship. Do you think many people within the African music industry understand the importance of sponsorship and also how to secure sponsorship?
I think people do understand the importance of it and the need for it, but sometimes then matching the understanding and the need for it and actually doing what is needed for you to be able to get it that's where the problem is. And, a lot of people know that, I need to be able to do A, B, C, D for me to get to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But a lot of people are not prepared for that, to do what's needed for you to get where you want to go. I'm going to give you a personal example. I've been going on a weight loss journey. I knew that I wanted to lose weight. I knew that I needed to get into shape, but I wasn't prepared to spend the hours to change my eating habits, spend hours in gym and sign up and spend money on personal trainers. So I think it's exactly the same thing. A lot of, people that are in my space, in my shoes, know that they do need sponsors. But before you do get sponsors, there's certain things that you need to start doing before you become attractive and before you become a target for sponsorship. So that's where the trick is. I think you just need to do what you need to do for you to become a good, attractive event property for sponsors to come and work with you.
Over the last few years, we have seen the rise of African music globally.
Mm-hmm.
With this rise, has it attracted more sponsors or investors who are interested in partnering with African music or creative brands?
I think so. Especially Zimbabwe, we're getting to that point. For some years, we really weren't getting, a lot of support from the corporate world. We did get a phase where we had a big festival in Zimbabwe called, HIFA, Harare International Festival of the Arts. I think you may know that one. It used to get a lot of support from the corporate space. But after that, that festival no longer happens now. But after that, we didn't see a lot of anything happening, as far as support to the creative industry goes. It's getting better, and we are seeing more and more companies coming in and supporting creatives and artists in that space. And because I also work on the continent, we are seeing a lot of corporates definitely putting money and throwing support to the creative space. So I'll talk about Stanbic Bank, whose mother company is Standard Bank on the continent. In Zimbabwe, it's called Stanbic Bank. They actually have a huge presence and a circuit that we're actually starting that contributes to the creative economy. We've got festivals that are actually related. Our sister festival is called Luju Festival, which happens in Eswatini, Swaziland. The bank also supports a big festival in Zambia. They also support a big festival in Namibia and Mozambique and Joy of Jazz in South Africa and also in Kenya. So because they are doing all these events across the continent, we saw it fit that these events actually need to be related in many ways, where we share skills, where we share best practices. We were in Eswatini about 3 weeks ago for Luju, and I went with the marketing executives from my bank here in Zimbabwe and marketing executives from Namibia were there, from Swaziland, from Lesotho were there, from Zambia, and from South Africa. And we managed to meet on the sidelines of that event to actually discuss the direction of where the bank is going on the continent and also how they can play a part with where we are going as, creative entrepreneurs. And I think we're seeing more and more of those deliberate conversations happening. And it's exciting what's ahead. And I think this is just us and one bank. This is just a whole bunch of festivals in one bank. And how many banks do we have in Africa? And how many companies do we have in Africa? And there's some global companies even that could also be part of this whole drive. And Africa definitely is popping right now. A lot of big African artists have really emerged in the last 5, 6 years. Winning Grammys, winning a lot of awards on a big world stage. So there's definitely a lot of scope in investment and in support that can come from corporate worlds to the growing African creative economy.
As you said, a trend that we're currently seeing is increased interest from the corporate world. So if we move from the current trends and look at the future, where do you see Africa in 5 years' time in terms of how we cross-collaborate, whether it's across markets or with partnerships with the creative industry and the corporate world? How do you see that evolving in the creative industry?
I think I'll go back to the same answer that I gave you earlier on. We've seen how businesses have really embraced the sporting sector, for example. Soccer teams, the Olympics, the NBA, the NFL, whatever. It's the same thing. There's certain spaces and certain niches and certain things that in the sporting world, they've really gone the extra mile into making sure that they create spaces and they create value spaces and value chains for corporates to slot in. And that's why a lot of these sports are so big now. On our TVs, we have 30 sporting channels and we'll have 5 music channels. The reason why that is because there's a channel for basketball, there's a channel dedicated for Formula One, there's a channel dedicated for soccer and football. So whereas for music, there's one channel that's dedicated for a whole bunch of music related anything. So what I'm driving at is we need to possibly look and see how sport has managed to make space for corporate, which has then made all the sports bigger. In Africa, I don't really know much about Formula One, but I don't remember a Formula One race happening in Africa. But a lot of people consume Formula One in Africa. And the reason why it's consumed in such a big way is because obviously the corporate companies that have poured money into that have made the sports popular, even here in Africa, even though we don't host that particular sport here. Same thing with the NBA. It's an American league, but it's big in Africa. A lot of people watch it here. And same thing with the British Premier League. It's consumed hectically in Africa. But how did it become so big? I think it's because of the way that they managed to create ways of working with business so that the sport can be bigger. So the bigger the reach that you have as an artist, as a festival, as any creative, the more money that you can attract and the more corporate support you can attract. There's a lot that is also still demanded from us as practitioners to be able to see that kind of growth happening.
If we look closer to home, where do you see yourself and the work that you'll be doing in 5 years' time? What influence do you hope to have on Africa's creative music industry?
Like the work that I'm doing right now obviously demands me to physically be in good shape and everything else. So as I'm getting older, I would love to still be involved in the creative economy, but not necessarily in anything that demands too much of me as I'm getting older. I think I want to teach for as long as possible. I would love to be able to create platforms or be able to take part in anything that is educational related. Like I said, I love the education side of things and I love the sharing of knowledge and that kind of thing. I hope that I can be able to share what I know and what I've learned or create spaces where others are coming in to teach, create creatives, creative practitioners, creative entrepreneurs, anything that is to do with the creative space, music, whatever. I would love to be involved in that space, something like that.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Walter. Very wise words, and it's clear that you're in it for the right reasons, right intentions to create impact, not just for yourself, but the whole ecosystem and people within it.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
It's not necessarily a proverb. It's not necessarily an old African saying, but this is something that I learned from my mentor, Dr. Huma Sekela. And I literally have it tattooed on me. It says, love, learn, and teach again.
Wow.
And when he told me about that is, you got to love, whether you love what you do, you love people, this world is driven, the positive side of this world is driven by love. And we need to be able to do everything that we do with love. And without love for each other, without love for those around us, we really have nothing, And when you love something and when you love what you do and when you love other people, that is what is going to be the foundation. That's what drives you. And once you have something that you love, or once you have someone that you love, or once you have a group of people, your country, or whatever, then you're going to want to learn more about it, which is then the next word is love, learn. And you're going to want to learn more about people. You're going to want to learn more about whatever practice. You're going to want to learn more about playing bass or doing events or whatever. So love, learn, and the last one is teach. And for whatever it is that you love and whatever it is that you've acquired knowledge about in your learning, the next best thing that you can do is to teach other people about it and to share your knowledge and to be able for that particular thing to grow. And for you to be able to love people enough to teach them also so that they become better than you. So that's something that I would love to say is the last or the last thing that I'll say. Love, learn, and teach.
Beautiful. Love, learn, and teach. And it's clear that you live by that. It's been a fantastic conversation, very refreshing conversation, Walter. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey with us and the great work that you're doing via the festivals and the music aspect and also the cultural and learning educational aspect. As someone who in my early days spent a lot of my youth in the music industry, I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thank you so much, my brother. I really, really appreciate it. And thanks for thinking of me. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you and to have this really great conversations. I've basically enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. And I look forward to hearing how things develop with not just the Jacaranda Music Festival, but all the other festivals and ventures that you're involved in. And we will speak soon.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.